Trigger warning. This episode dives into the theme of mental health and can include discussions of sensitive topics.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from anywhere you're listening in the world. Today I'm Shulin, and I'm here with Nick, and we're going to be talking about mental health related content or anything that we want to talk about. So, Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Shulin. My name's Nick Johnston. I'm a health writer and a ghostwriter, which means that I write articles, content. I have a background as a journalist across all areas of health, but in particular mental health. And then I work as a ghostwriter, which means I write books for medical and wellness professionals. Again, often to do with mental health, but not only, it can also be physical health.
Yeah. And when you told me about your story and about your experience, I felt really moved by how you were able to transform your own struggles and your how you could use your own experience and channel that into how you could help other people and help others find their way and find their way through bettering their mental health and bettering their physical health as well. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with the listeners how you were able to and what made you really start and have the idea to use to really start going into that mental health area and sector. Yeah.
Um, Well, I mean, I guess it start like for anybody who's doing anything like you're doing with the podcast, it starts, I think, with it starts from a point of pain, I think. The point of pain becomes a need to address or resolve or accept the point of pain. And then you're obviously looking for things that you can do that can get you out of that situation. So I think in my, early childhood, very early teens, I could feel something was not right, something was different, something was alienating. I didn't see the experience of people I was at school with or neighbors. Nobody seemed to be kind of finding life as difficult as I seemed to be finding it. And into that, I had like one passion at school, which were my like literature classes. I had a really inspiring teacher who would like send me home with extra reading because I was always asking for extra reading. And I found through certain books that came up, perhaps a mirror or reflection for the experiences that I was having. For example, I remember like it's a very kind of popular book, I guess, in the mental health community now, but The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And I remember my teacher recommended this, and I was reading it thinking, oh my God, somebody actually is having a similar experience to me in this book. So that process, I think, of not finding humans in the actual real world that I could identify with, but starting to find that through literature also expanded out. I also loved music, so it was also I started to kind of gravitate to people who made music who were talking about mental health struggles and and then kind of looking at how do they deal with it and what do they do and what do they talk about. And so over time, I think this compounded into me writing stuff at home, attempting to make music at a certain point, but once I kind of entered my professional career. It came in through music. So that was my initial thing. But I just want to meet the people that get me through today and help me get through tomorrow. And that as a music journalist, that was sort of what was interesting to me was to be able to meet the musicians who'd saved my life, if you like. Um, so those exchanges when I would meet different musicians were incredibly powerful and poignant for me. And then a lot of the interviews that I did as a music journalist in my kind of early 20s would feature talking about mental health struggles. And then I ended up sort of thinking, well, they're saying things up to a point, and I feel like there's more I want to people to say. So then I started thinking, well, why don't I say it? So I started to write a book which is called A Head Full of Blue, which was about me and my kind of teen years and my mental health struggles with depression, with anxiety, and then subsequently trying to medicate that with alcohol that became an alcohol addiction, which then became the need to um, get sober from that. And that book kind of catapulted me into my journalism change from music journalism, where I talk to musicians about mental health, into just writing about mental health.
And I have a quick question because listening from what you've like talked about so far, and it's really amazing what you've done and a lot of like I think it's everyone's journey is really unique, but um sometimes when I listen to some people's stories, it really like resonates with me some way and it really inspires me to um do what I do. So like restart this podcast, for example, and you're one of the people that really like inspired me to keep going. And I just wanted to ask what it was like, and I think many listeners would also be interested in what it would be like to, because for you, it was like in this day and age, like sometimes, like for me and my peers, we talk about mental health a lot. But you did mention when we talked that it was very different when you first decided to speak out and to write your book. So
Mhm.
what was the process like thinking behind it? Because I wanted to know like how could you how can you inspire other people if they're also afraid to first step out and to first talk about issues like this?
Sure. Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to ask that, Shilan, because it's true. Like I see, like there was obviously a lot of content in all forms now about mental health, and the discussion has really changed. And for the most part, but not entirely, I would say the taboo nature of it is changing, and there's more kind of grappling about
Yeah.
how to talk about it, how to treat it, and the medicines and everything. But when I wrote A Head Full of Blue, so this was published a long time ago now, 2002. And I remember vividly a conversation. The publisher had was Bloomsbury, and they had just started to get really successful with the first Harry Potter book, and they had been a smaller publisher up to that point. And they said, "Oh, we're going to really invest in when we publish your book." And the head of publicity said to me, "I'm really worried about you making this book public because you talk about depression, you talk about suicidal thoughts, you talk about self-harm, you talk about alcohol abuse, you talk about drug abuse, you talk about panic attacks." And she was like, "I don't want to sound like I'm your mother, but," she said, "if you publish this book, you might ruin your career for the rest of your life. Like you could be unemployable." And I hadn't strictly thought about it like this. There were one or two books that had come out at the time that had kind of, in a way, put an axe in the ice of the big taboo of all of this. One was called Prozac Nation by a writer called Elizabeth Wurtzel. And when she published this, it was groundbreaking because it was the first piece of work by anyone, I think, since the bell jar that had said mental health could affect people and they could also still be, whilst being extremely unwell, could also be high functioning. And it completely changed the idea that somebody who was going through a period of mental ill health would be incapacitated completely and absolutely in all kinds of conditions. So Prozac Nation had sort of inspired me a little bit. Where I was like, well, why not follow that? Um, there was another book called Drinking a Love Story by another journalist called Caroline Knapp, who was also told she'd ruin her career if she went public writing about alcoholism. So I think a lot of people said to me, "I don't know if you should do this. You may never be able to send a resume to anyone ever again because if they look you up and see, well, this is what the story was." So at the time, I I kind of felt like, well, I have to do this anyway. And the people that I felt an affinity to professionally, i.e., lots of musicians that I had been meeting, they didn't really kind of live in that conventional realm anyway. So in my mind, I was like, well, I just want to be like that. So I'm going to say my thing. It was received very aggressively, and there was a significant media tour that involved going on TV in the UK to like an audience of about, I can't remember how many people, 7 million people in the UK, which was a lot of the adult population at the time. And the interview was absolutely horrible. And I think they said something like, your story is a disgrace. Nobody should be talking about mental health like this. You should keep it to yourself. We don't want to hear about it. Your family must be ashamed. Which they were. My family were very much like, we wish you hadn't written this book. This is a private matter. You should keep it to yourself. So the tensions of it were absolutely fascinating in that I felt like I was made to feel like I did something really bad to just talk about something that, in a way, like you say, we can talk more freely about it, but I'm still not sure absolutely. It's more selective.
Yeah, like because now in this when we talk about mental health now, it's a lot different from 2002, but there's still a lot of taboos and how we can't speak about certain topics. And
Mm,
I don't feel I feel really I admire you for how you were able to do what you felt like was right and what you felt like you wanted to do. And because that's essentially like for me when I made my podcast, I was also told that I shouldn't talk about that. And
okay.
and also, when I first put my face and associate myself with my podcast, that was when I was told I shouldn't associate my name because I had my name on the website as well and my face, and they were like, "Yeah, if you get if someone searches you up, they're gonna see it." So I feel like there's a lot of even till this day, there's a lot of that. But of course, um your how you were able to like I guess a better word to cope and to challenge that and how to be able to go through all the because 7 million people watching you and a lot of interviews that's I cannot ever imagine going through that because that's a lot of people and for especially at that time in 2002 I don't know what it's like so it would be difficult for a lot of like for me, I could just imagine how difficult it would be. And I was just wondering what really was able to when's the point where you realize that the world's shifting, as in because you obviously had a huge you had made a huge impact and you were able to change how people think about I think you were one of the people that really shifted the conversation because like you said, people didn't really talk about mental health during
Mhm.
when the book was published, and it was received very aggressively. And now, if you were to publish it today, I think it'd be very different. So, yeah, it'd
Yes.
be probably received very people would be complimenting you for talking about it and for speaking out about it. And I think there are many books that do mention these topics now that I've read. So, yeah, how did you really realize that there was a shift in the world?
I think because after that book came out, certainly in the UK or in London, I had the strange experience of, of being out in a number of places in public and people coming up to me, which was very strange because it's like, look, I kind of wrote this book a little bit for myself, and then it happens to be public. But I had some people sort of approach me, like I remember, like in the middle of a lunch in a restaurant, someone came and said to me, "I just want to say, are you the guy who wrote Head Full of Blue? Well, this means the world to me. This book." Um, had the same experience in a supermarket before a yoga class. I mean, really. So I had a feeling of like, well, hang on, there are other people for whom this is valuable, not just people in the media. Like I was saying about, that TV interview in particular, it was very damaging, and that the person who was interviewing, who's meant to be a very respected journalist, said something like, "You talk about self-harming throughout your teens." And he's like, well, all our viewers want to know if you're secretly self-harming, where do you store all the blood? Do you just put it all in a bucket? Something like this. And I was just like, that's grossly insensitive for a start and grossly inaccurate. But trying to take that type of thing on, it was like felt a bit like a kind of a very large crowd of people who were like, you will be quiet. But then there were individuals who would almost kind of come to me a bit nervously, like, I don't want to be heard saying this in public, but I just want to tell you this helped me. So after that book, the Guardian newspaper here in the UK, I began to write a column for them that was like an iteration of the book called Blue Notes. And they were basically like, take all the kind of stuff that you challenged with the book and go much farther with it. Like really push it. We want you to tell everyone what does it feel like with self-harm? Why would someone do it? Talk about suicidal thoughts. So I had basically had a mandate to write as fully and absolutely as I wanted to. And that went on for about 3 years, I think. And that's when I noticed things started changing because this was still a point where it toggled also kind of, the internet's evolution in that initially it was like old school handwritten letters were piling into the newspaper office, just saying like, I don't know, this column that this person is writing, I've waited years for this. I finally am understood. And it was getting more and more intense, like these huge packs of letters were arriving. Then it became lots of emails as emails developing. And I started to think something's changing. And then across the sort of the genesis of that newspaper column, each year there was a mental health journalism awards prize that kind of came out by a mental health charity called Mind. And in the first year, there were hardly any categories entered. So it wasn't too difficult for me to get nominated. Like it was a bit easy because people weren't doing this. And then I noticed in the second year, it was suddenly much more competitive. And then in the third year of the column, there were so many entries suddenly. So this was about 2005, 2006, and you could feel something really changing. And then I think, with the advent of, I think as things really move forwards with Facebook and especially Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, you could see the volume of material become more pronounced, but not necessarily massively distinguishing. So that's why when I heard your podcast, it was recommended to me on Spotify. I was like, this is really refreshing because I feel like everything that you're talking about on here, I'm not hearing this anywhere else, and I'm still as eager as I was when I was 12, 14, or 20 or 30 to hear a reflection of what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, and I think mostly for me, like my goal is just I guess it's sort of the same for you, but to be like to make it personal for people to be able to resonate with something that I'm saying and to like really show my truth. And if some people don't want to listen to it, they don't believe in what I have to say, as long as I'm able to help like that one or two, like I don't need to help a lot of people. Like as long as a few people are able to like feel like they can relate to my story and feel like they're not alone, that's like ultimately my goal. And I think that like even now it's only been a few years, but I feel like I've been able to do that. And like you've reached out to me and almost like half a year ago now, I think. And that was like at first I was like, oh, okay, I don't know because it fell in my spam folder. So I was like, like is this like one of those like emails that would just end up like telling me to like do something or I don't know. I thought it was a promotional email at first.
Oh, I see. All right.
Yeah, this was in my spam folder and it was like flagged as like be aware of this email. So I was oh, okay. But afterwards when I got it was actually when I got LinkedIn and I searched I was like, "Oh, I remember about that email." So I searched your name up and I was like, "Oh wow. This is not a spam." And so um decided to email you back, and that's when like you shared your story and you shared how like my podcast helped you and how that was able and you would listen to my podcast and you're the first person to tell me that you listen to every episode of my podcast. So,
Yes.
so I'm so happy because honestly I like one of the reasons I stopped was because I didn't think anyone was listening to my podcast. So I thought like I might as well like change what I want to like focus on. And so now like being able to see that, oh, someone is listening to my podcast. And um you you watched Project 15 as well and you said you really liked it as well. So I'm really like glad and I'm really happy that people do actually like listen to the stuff that I push out, but also because that there are people and if we think about it, we're at very different like journeys in life, like you said. and we're in very different stages in our lives and across the world as well. So,
Yeah.
and we're able to connect through this single point. It's like it's very special to be able to talk to someone and to have this opportunity to talk to someone about like mental health or anything that comes up in this conversation. It's really special to be able to like have every time I have a conversation with someone, I'm saying how special it is to talk to someone because honestly, there's a lot of people in the world right now, 8 billion people. So it's a bit, I always think that it's quite special to be able to have like a meaningful conversation with someone.
Absolutely. And it's also, it's a wild idea, isn't it? Um that you can put out a podcast or you can make a film, and all you can do is be generous in making it and putting it out there. You have no real sense of like where it will land, or as you say, you don't know if it lands in people listen to it, they get it, they watch it, they don't get it. But at the same time, if you're also that person who's looking for people to make things, then it can come from anywhere, can't it? It can come from a song, it can come from a book, it can come from a podcast, a short film. Um, Overhearing two people talking on the subway or the tube, and those pieces of information are can be the ones that make a huge difference, as you say, to like your motivation or even just like if you're going through a really particularly bad time, those things can just land in a really simple way. And yeah, no, I did go through all the episodes of your podcast. I thought the short film was, you know, it is, I feel like so many people have tried, myself included, to capture like that idea of feeling like that, moving into like a terrain of suicidal thinking. And I feel like a lot of medical experts I work with also find that they've learned it, but they haven't felt it. And then when I watched your film, I was like, that's the feeling.
Mhm.
That's healing. Like people can learn from that, of course, from watching it, but it's capturing a feeling that's so powerful.
Yeah, it's the and for my film, I really tried to capture how people living with suicidal thoughts or depression can still like have that feeling of like every day is like the monotonous like daily life. And I tried to capture that like the daily routine so people can see from the outside that they are like people feel like they're normal, but like for them they feel different or they feel like isolated and alone in their own world and unable to like navigate their thoughts. So that was like what I was trying to like show. And I'm glad that I was able to like because I didn't expect it. I was a little selfish at first. I just wanted to do it because I thought it'd be like a fun project for me to do and to it'd be like sort of like healing for me. But when I posted it, I was like, oh, people do want to watch it. And when I watched it, I thought it was a bit boring after I watched it. It was fun to film, but when I watched it, I was like, oh, it's very long. It's 10 minutes and it's just me like walking around and there's like no dialogue or anything. So I thought, oh, no one's gonna watch this. And a few days after I posted it on Instagram, and uploaded it on YouTube, I went to comment section. I was like, "Oh, people do want to like." People are asking me, "Oh, how can you, help me? How can I get help? What do I do when I feel like talking but I can't talk and I can't speak?" And I feel the same way, but I don't know what to do. And I'm like, "Oh, so there's a lot of people that feel the same way. They just don't know where to channel into." And I guess that brings me kind of to this second point that I wanted to talk about, which was like teenagers now and social media, because uploading on YouTube and they see a lot of like content on social media. And from my firsthand experience, it could be very harmful, but also very positive sometimes. So, um, I was wondering if you had like, what do you think about like those I guess like coping mechanisms because for me, I would always like go on Instagram whenever I'm feeling sad. And sometimes I feel like it's very healthy for me to do that, but at the same time, it's not. So I was wondering, like, because a lot of teenagers nowadays and a lot of my peers, I hear people and teenagers talking about like, um, indulging in alcohol and vaping and like negative and unhealthy coping mechanisms like those. So, what are your thoughts on like those mechanisms?
I think all of them have a tipping point, don't they? And that I think it's like anything that you do can be a healthy distraction, for example, if we're talking about like about suicidal thoughts or an urge to self-harm or perhaps somebody wants to be like, I'm gonna drink until I can't think straight. Um, so in that case, I guess going on Instagram or I guess anything that might distract, but it's not going to do any harm to your body. Now, obviously, you're right. If you consume some kind of content on Instagram that started to make you feel negative, that started to make you think about anything from do I have enough? Do I look good enough? Am I wealthy enough, healthy enough? Why am I not also, on a vacation right now, or whatever it might be? If that kind of um, downwards comparison, I think, as people call it, starts to happen where you basically, you can self-harm by looking at content where people would appear to be leading a life that's a lot easier and simpler than yours, then it has a tipping point. But if it's like I could A, get drunk, B, self-harm, C, continue to have suicidal thoughts, or if I if there wasn't the option to say go for a run or sit and meditate or take a bath and relax or take a shower or something, then you could go on Instagram if it was healthy for you, and you might be like, oh, I'll focus on the inspiring chef, I'll focus on the really funny goat videos that I enjoy or the cute dog videos or whatever. Then maybe I think that's okay. I think there's a really nice acronym that I know I mentioned to you, STIRBS, which comes from like a grief recovery method program that was invented, and it stands for short-term energy releasing behaviors. And I really like this because I think STIRBS helps you understand if it's something that's healthy or if it's something with a tipping point. So if it's something that you do that releases energy and then you feel bad 5 minutes later, then I think it's definitely a STIRB. So if you're like, I can't deal with my life right now, I'm going to scroll on Instagram, and then 2 hours has gone by and you feel brain fog and you feel worse about your life and you feel demotivated and you just want to go to sleep, then that was probably using it as a stirb. If you went on there for an hour and you're like, do you know what? In the hour that's happened, I've laughed, I've got an idea to cook something, and I've seen a place that I'd love to travel to someday in my life. That and now I feel like the crisis I was having 2 hours ago has passed, then that wouldn't be a stirb. I think that would be a healthy distraction.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Instagram or any social media is you can't really, even if the algorithm is suited for you, you can't really control it. As in, sometimes, like in my experience, sometimes I'll be um scrolling through like dog videos, and suddenly there'll be some really insensitive content that pops up. So
Okay.
like I feel like that happens to a lot of people as well, especially teens, and so they'll see content that maybe they're not ready for, and there will be no trigger warning or anything, and so that might lead to what you talked about, like feeling worse afterwards, or even wanting to self-harm because of like a particular reel or something like that.
Yes, you're right. I guess there's always something unpredictable about any engagement with social media. I think you're so right. And that is, as you say, like, yeah, stuff will come up that hasn't been monitored, it hasn't been reported, and also we all have different pain points for different things. So five people might be shown a post and be fine about that or a video, and then you and I might look at that and it might be very harmful. So it's it's very hard to quantify what's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why a lot of people turn to like other like really harmful ways to cope with their emotions, because like if just scrolling on social media would harm someone, then they might decide, at least that's what I've heard, that they decide to indulge in other coping mechanisms that are even more harmful, because if the harm's going to be done anyways, they might as well feel like they have some type of control over it. So that's like,
Mhm.
I guess, what some of my some of my peers or some people that are like at similar age and similar stage of life to me, that's what I've heard from them. Yeah.
Mm. And I think, also I think a lot of sort of addictive behavior, psychology, psychiatry. It talks a lot about like like people having like I sort of described quite well of like mental health when it tips out of balance can feel like an inner fire inside yourself. And in the same way that if you encountered a real life fire, it's very difficult to think straight or to have a pragmatic way of dealing with it. You're just going to want to run. And therefore, if that's how that felt, like I remember very vividly, being 14 and getting drunk for the first time, and it was this remarkable kind of shutting down of what I realized had up to that point had been this lifelong feeling of unbearableness, just this siren level anxiety, panic, and then a matching depression. And then in this one evening, it was this weird feeling of like the fire's been put out. And I didn't know it could be that easy. So I think these type of behaviors, actually, there's something in between there being a big fire and you putting it out really simply. In the middle of that, there's a whole process, I think, of actually assessing. You don't need to shut yourself down in order to look at what's uncomfortable. It's actually looking at what's uncomfortable will actually help you get data. Like your body and your mind give you data all the time, and that data says my leg hurts, so maybe you know, uh, I better not play volleyball tomorrow. I feel really sad today. That's data on something that needs addressing. So I think since I kind of had that idea of it, I think those kinds of impulses and I'm not saying that I still don't have t those impulses because I think that it's a lifelong challenge, but you feel really uncomfortable. You want to not feel uncomfortable. And the way life is arranged is you have a menu of things that you can do to like drown it out. But of course, they're all temporary unless you're going to become addicted to something.
Yeah, it's like that temporary relief that people are chasing, and it's difficult to see like long term when you're in the fire, you don't talk about like your future. Like you don't think about what's gonna happen in like 2 years because you're
Exactly.
focused on what's happening right now. And I think that's a great metaphor for how people might feel when they're under that like stress and under that pressure. It's like a fire that's like engulfing them, and like a lot of people might just feel like they're trapped and they need that temporary relief. Like they just have to run and get out of that fire and to put that fire out, even though like it won't help in the long term. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think also, I remember this one expert kind of talking about this analogy further, and she said, and then after someone has self-harmed and the high is worn off, after someone drank alcohol and the high wore off, after they vaped, took a drug, whatever it is, spent 5 hours on social media, after that, there is like a remorse and a crashing out of that high. And then people almost have the emotional resonance of what can I save from the fire? It's almost like life gets very small and very particular. And then it's like, well, I need to go and save my two favorite books and that photo of my family. And I think the idea of putting that fire out is actually things are so big you want to shrink them down. So I think all the sturbs, all of these short-term energy releasing behaviors, they actually give you back a narrow focus so you can be like, what's actually matters in this chaos? And then for 5 seconds in that remorse, you might have some information that's useful. But then obviously that wears off, and then you need to do it all again to get that same feeling.
Yeah, it's like a cycle that for a lot of people feels like it will never end. Yeah.
Yes, and I think cycles are everywhere. It's not just, it can be anything. We can go shopping to when we're feeling really low. We can go and do a lot of exercise. There are so many things that we can do. Uh, it plays out with food. There are so many areas in life where you can get in a cycle, but actually, it's that kind of lovely idea of, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It's like life will really be hard, and especially if you're prone to mental health difficulties. But how you manage those feelings and those emotions will weigh up how much suffering you then have.
Yeah, that's a very good point because time's running out, so I just wanted to ask you the if you could tell someone, or a teenager or anyone who's going through a tough time, what would you say to them if you could only say one thing? But I felt like you already mentioned that doing what you just said because it is like pain. I've never really thought about it that way, but like you are right, like pain is always gonna be there, but suffering, you don't have to suffer through that pain. But if you could think of one thing to to tell our listeners when they're going through a tough time, what would that be?
I think it's, I think what I wish I had known when I was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and even later than that is that a lot of people around you will tell you what your mental health is about. A lot of people will tell you how you should be treated, how you can get better, what are the things you're doing that are making it worse. And I think actually I think you can have two psychiatrists talk to you, and you'll very rarely get the same diagnosis or the same opinion. You can have two therapists, one will be terrible and the next one will be amazing. So I think the most important thing is actually to realize that you are the CEO of your own mental health. Nobody knows the inside of your mind better than you, and to always listen to your instinct. So if you feel like you're 3 sessions in with a therapist and it just doesn't feel quite right, then change that therapist. There are thousands of therapists and they're all very different. If a psychiatrist feels like they're diagnosing you with something that doesn't feel quite right for you, do your own research and get a second opinion. If a parent or a friend or a partner or a teacher is saying to you, oh, you're being lazy, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, or if only you did this, again, you are the CEO of this situation, and you don't have to listen to anyone else's opinions because only yours will matter.
Yeah, I think that's very important for not just our listeners, but for anyone to really have that feeling of that they're in control and they're the CEO of what they want to do. So
Mm.
thank you so much for being here today and talking to me and having this conversation with me. I hope you have a really good day. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, Shulin. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a real honor. I'm a huge fan of what you do, and yeah, I'm a real admirer. Thank you.
thank you.